This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Morning decisions. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
We're the podcast, and you'll join us for our Monday supplement as Sunderland were a stroke of the ball away from potentially winning 3 games in a row for the first time this season, but ended up leaving Villa Park with nothing after an epic 7-goal thriller in the West Midlands. As we talked about on the immediate reaction podcast straight after the final whistle, it left us feeling a little bit pissed off and proud all at the same time. But now we've had a bit of time to digest and put it into perspective. We can look back again at Sunderland's 4-3 defeat at high-flying Aston Villa with a fresh pair of eyes. I have a couple of people to help me put everything into perspective. And first up, we have our very own Johnny Hawley. Hello, Johnny.
Hello, Chris. Yeah, that sounded very chipper there considering the result that we're talking about. But I think the day's rest was very much needed to put things into perspective, because if you'd had me on the reaction pod, might not have been such clarity and erudite thoughts being put forward, I might suggest.
Yeah, well, you can probably tell I'm still a little bit confused about the whole thing, to be honest, even though there was a therapy session straight after the final whistle. But that's it. You listened to that, and you were straight in the chat saying, well done, lads, because I'm not sure I could have been kind of that level-headed after the full-time whistle. So have you had a chance to calm down a bit?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those, like, you're always going to be emotional in the immediate aftermath, aren't you? It's, last minute, there's drama, it's one end to the other, and, we all know what happened. But once it settles down a bit and you can maybe take those couple of steps back and just take it all in the round, we're still fine, aren't we? You know what I mean? It was always a game that we were favourites to lose. There's no shame in getting beat by a Villa team who's going to qualify for the Champions League and potentially win European silverware. And it knocks our European run, but it also doesn't totally derail it. So you can start taking the positives out of it and looking forward. But I wasn't thinking that way 5 minutes after full time.
Yeah, I mean, it knocks our European run. I mean, what a ridiculous statement that is. We didn't expect it to make. But anyway, also joining us today, we have a very good friend of the podcast, and it's been far too long since we heard him on our pod, because we're delighted to have Phil Smith from the Sunderland Echo with us. Hello, Phil.
Hello, how are we doing?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think I might know better by the time we get through again and talk about it. But we'll get into the result, of course, and the performance and the hows and the whys, Phil. But as a game of football, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did. I really enjoyed it. It was very challenging, as you can imagine. I was trying to think before about when was the last time I had a game where I had to do so many rewrites. So I sort of had my handle at the game at 3-1, which was, spirited performance from Sunderland, but Villa were just a bit good. And then, the Hume scores, and it's like, okay, consolation, fair play. And then I had about 8 different intros over the space of about 7 minutes. So yeah, it was complete carnage. I'm quite exhausted today from it all, but it was a great game. And we'll get into it in a bit, but I'm probably more annoyed this morning because I think yesterday I was probably on a bit of a buzz from just how good the game was and seeing Sunderland give it a good go. I think when you look at the table today, you're like, oh my word, imagine if we'd won it. So in a weird way, I think I'm more kind of annoyed today than I was yesterday, but I think there's levels to the fume, right? And I don't think you can fume in any way when I left Cheltenham when we lost 2-1 that night. It's just a different universe. And yes, I think a little bit of fume and disappointment is absolutely fine, but there is also this thing, right, of this is what it was all about, to see Sunderland competing in the Premier League. And so I find it very, very hard to be critical. Obviously, there's things Sunderland need to improve on, and we'll go into that in time. But I loved the game. It was a great game. That's what it's all about, right? Going, trying to get on the front foot. And at the end of the day, you've lost to an exceptional team. It hurts, but that is the reality of life in the Premier League, I guess, as well.
Yeah. I mean, God, Phil, I mean, talk about putting things into perspective, going back to losing at Cheltenham and stuff like that. I mean, Christ, that's really putting it into perspective. But I mean, just on that, I mean, I'm now trying to put myself in your position, Phil, because I was just writing notes to be able to talk about it to yourself and Johnny. And I only wrote a few lines on the first, half an hour of the second half. And then I wrote about, double the amount just on the last 10 minutes. And my last kind of comment before I started scribbling those last 10 minutes is the game is petering out. And we're, it's just one of them where you just can't get a foothold in the game and it's just petering out. And with 10 minutes to go, that's how it felt, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And I think obviously I guess the moment that changes a bit, I mean, credit to Sunderland for, staying in it and showing that bit of resilience. But the moment that changed it was when Watkins and McGinn came off, because they'd clearly been the two best players on the pitch. And the dip in sort of intensity in Aston Villa in those moments afterwards was really, really noticeable. And, I know we'll get into the game in total, but I think when we talk about the fact that Sunderland should have won it through Diarra, I think we should probably also head it off at the pass and say Aston Villa could possibly have been like 5-1 up with 10 minutes to go, because their control and their threat in that 15, 20 minutes before the absolute carnage started was pretty complete, I would suggest. So it's one of those, it was, I do think by the end, Aston Villa let Sunderland into it. But, credit, there's one thing you say about this team is that they stay in games, and they did that again yesterday. So, it was, carnage, absolute carnage. I mean, just absolutely incredible sort of 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Johnny, just because of the games that were going on, because obviously you had the Man City Arsenal game that was going to follow us. We were kicking off at the same time as the Merseyside derby. And I think, everyone just kind of forgot about our game and forgot about the Forest game against Burnley. But actually, I actually ended up, really frustrated, as anyone who heard the immediate reaction will have heard my reaction to it. But at the same time, I had a big cheesy grin on my face, knowing that Sunderland had been part of potentially one of the best Premier League games this season.
Well, I thought the Premier League was boring now, right? Football's horrible and we all hate watching it. I mean, just point at yesterday, that was a fantastic day of football all round. Obviously, our result for us, not great. But yeah, it was strange, isn't it, to be part of a 7-goal thriller with that ending, and it definitely not even be in the top 2 games of the day in the media, because obviously Merseyside derby, Arsenal City is always going to overtake it. But like Phil said before, I think it was a really good point. Like, this was the reason we were excited to come up, was to be involved in days like this, and to be, obviously, you want to come out on the winning side, and you don't want to be remembered for things like, say, Sheffield United getting beat 8-0. Thrilling game for the neutral, but you don't really want that on your copybook. But the fact that we weren't just there making up the numbers and we were genuinely competitive, we gave Villa a right scare. I mean, obviously, once we pulled it back to 3-3, then there was, you wouldn't call it a chance, but where Diarra squares it across the box and Isidore directly shoves Conter onto the ground and then he heads it around the post, which was a bit of a weird one. But that had Villa definitely rattled. They were not prepared for what we threw at them towards the end of that game. And I think that's, again, like, it speaks volumes to the work that's been done at Sunderland over the past couple of seasons, especially, to mould us into an outfit who are capable of doing that. Because, as I've said a million times already, the result wasn't great. We all know that. But at the same time, it only hurt so much because it was there for the taking. And for it to have been there for the taking shows that we were doing a lot of things right, because there are better teams than us have gone to Villa Park this season and not had a sniff in the last couple of minutes because they've been out the game already. There are far better teams than us who've missed easier chances than that to put games to bed and to win games. So this is all part of the trying to take stock, right? You've got to attempt to put it into perspective. And I think once you do that, it is pretty easy to recognise that there are a lot of things in that performance to be really proud of for Sunderland as a club and a fan base, and specifically for Lebris and the players. I thought we'll get into the game, but we created a hell of a lot of chances compared to what we have looked like at times this season. And absolutely, Villa could have scored more and probably should have with 1 or 2 chances, but so should we. And that's something that I think they can take serious heart from. And because if we play like that in the rest of the games this season, we're going to take points more than we're going to lose games. So yeah, there's a lot to be proud of after you get over that gut punch.
Yeah. And you did say this is the reason why we wanted to be in the Premier League, but I have to admit it's much more fun watching McGinn and Watkins from a neutral's perspective when you're not actually playing against them. But Phil, let's get into the team because look, Dan Ballard replacing Jenson Jones on the bench was the only change from the match day scored from the win over Spurs. So the biggest question mark on the lineup ahead of kickoff, and that this was the discussion. It was all about kind of is Ballard fit? Would he come straight back in for 09? And we'll come on to 09's performance as we go through the game. But going back to before kickoff, Phil, I don't know whether you maybe heard more than maybe we did or caught things from the press conference. But do you think that bringing Ballard or not bringing Ballard straight into the starting lineup was more about Ballard's fitness, or was it more about 09's performance in the last couple of games?
I think it was primarily about the fitness. I think there was an element of both of it. I mean, Lebris all but said he was going to make this decision in the press conference where he talks about, we don't need to rush it with Ballard. And that is hugely unusual for Lebris to do that. Normally he would not answer a question like that. And he answered it relatively directly. And I think there was probably a reason for that, which is he wanted to get ahead of this and to kind of put the idea in people's minds almost that, I don't have a problem if people have the view that Dan Ballard's one of our best players and he should be in the starting 11 when he's fit. I think that's fair enough. The only thing I think that we should acknowledge when we have that discussion is he's a player who's missed quite a lot of football over the last 2 years. And so with a hamstring injury, can I understand Lebris taking the view, I don't want to lose this guy for the rest of the season, potentially with a recurrence. Luke 09 has produced 2 really good performances before this and he deserves a chance to continue. I think it's one of those where I don't think there was a lot of fume when the team came out. Do you know what I mean? Because I think there was an obvious kind of logic to the decision and it's easy, I guess, to look back now and say it was the wrong one. But I think, if Ballard is able to start the last 5 games of the season, Sunderland have a good chance of getting in the top 8. So that is the bigger picture here. Did Sunderland miss Ballard? Well, they clearly did because Watkins was absolutely unbelievable. And they would have had a better chance of coping with him with Ballard on the side. I think that's obvious. But I do think it's just worth putting Ballard's injury record over the last couple of years kind of in there as the picture. And, if he can play 90 minutes in these last 5 games of the season, we are going to be in a much stronger position. So did it work? Probably not. Can I see why he did it? Yeah, I kind of can.
Yeah. Just one from the bench, Johnny, just on the team, because we probably won't mention him again, but I just wanted to mention Hertrauder on the bench because he hasn't got on the last couple of games from memory, but he certainly didn't appear at Villa Park. And, from a point of view that we might or might not have a 18.6, I think, million pound move set up in the summer. And from a player who's come in and linked with Liverpool and wanting to be in his international side or wanting to be in his national side, and then he's looking and Luke 09 gets the nod, and then everybody's worried about Dan Ballard coming back into that back four, and he's not in the conversation. You've got to think that we probably won't see him in a Sunderland shirt next season, will we?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's pretty clear that Hertrauder's race is run in terms of earning a permanent move. I thought he played really well at Newcastle a few weeks ago. Like I think that was at his last start. And he, as I say, played really well. That tackle right near the end of the game was phenomenal. And he's always, whenever he's played, he's always, he's grafted hard. He's put himself about. I've got no qualms about him whatsoever as a player in that regard. I just think he's a victim of the fact that, Mukiele started the season at centre-half, let's not forget, and he looked brilliant there. Then he moved to right-back and, the rest is history. And Hertrauder's sort of main position was right-back, so he's that classic trap that these kind of players fall into is when you become a jack of all trades. It's a cliche for a reason. You're a master of none, and unfortunately, that's counting against him. As I think, to a degree, Luke 09's versatility has counted against him at times in his Sunderland career, where he's struggled to nail down a starting spot under certain managers because he's so good at covering across the pitch. And I think Hertrauder's a little bit like that. The only thing I would say is, I don't want to disparage him because I think he's got a great, professionalism and character, but I've never been massively impressed with him in any given game, as in he's never stood out over the rest of the players. And yes, he was linked to Liverpool, But the reasons he was linked up with Liverpool were because they were desperate for cover and their manager knows him. This is not to say that Hertrauda is not a good player and that he won't go on to have a really good career in top-level football. But it's not quite the same wanted by Liverpool as it would be in the summer when they're coming from a position of strength and they've got all the options available. That was very much a January-style move that was mooted. So, as I say, that's not to try and talk him down too much because he's not, he's not really put many feet wrong in the Sunderland shirt. He just hasn't had a chance to put many feet right. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear that he's not going to be here beyond the summer. And to a degree as well, you can understand the logic, can't you? It's similar as to why, Dan Neil was never seeing the pitch at the start of the season, because if you're not committed for the long term, then, as a head coach, Labris is going to be prioritising the people who will be here for the long term because they're the people who are going to be keeping him in a job at the end of the day. So, yeah, I think it's one of those where, all parties will shake hands in the summer, say, thanks very much, good luck with the next step, whatever that might be, and we'll all move on. And that's okay. There's room for those kind of transfers at this level. Not everyone needs to be a 10 out of 10 star signing that you sell for 100 million. So, yeah, good luck to him, whatever comes next.
Yeah, it'd be interesting one to watch in the summer. I'll just remind you there, Johnny, that actually you talked about Michele starting off at the start of the season in central defence. Looking back to that West Ham game, it was Jensen Sealed, wasn't
it? Yeah, big Jensen. Whatever happened to him?
Exactly. Well, that'll be an interesting one to see how he's done this season and how he comes back and all that. But anyway, getting into the game, Phil, it was about 1.5 minutes, and I think everyone was just getting comfy in their seats. Everyone was hadn't even taken notice what had gone on in the first minute. You just thought, expecting the players to just settle down. But then we get the opening goal after about 90 seconds, and I mean, it just smacked of Sunderland being absolutely fast asleep at this goal. We give them too much space in midfield. They got the ball out wide, and there seemed to be a bit of for me when you look at a wide midfielder defending with a fullback, there just seemed to be no communication between the two. Seemed to be a bit of a misunderstanding. Who was going to go with the ball? Who was going to go with the runner? Nobody went with McGinn. He ended up having so much time to cross the ball in, picked his spot out, and we weren't exactly lined up in the middle either, kind of marking the strikers at the back post, and Villa were one up.
Yeah, I think ultimately the story of the game, and this is going to sound like a strange thing to say when someone scored 3 goals, but Aston Villa were more ruthless. Every time we made a significant mistake during the game, we were picking the ball out the back of the net, it felt like, pretty much. And I think that just summed it up. I think we just started slowly. I think, as you say, I don't think you need to kind of overanalyze it, not picking up the runner. And I think that and the frustrating thing of that is, Sunderland should have been prepared for that. Villa are coming into the game on a high. They've just, booked their place in the Europa League last 4. They're at home. They're potentially cementing their place in the Champions League next season. I don't think a fast start should have been any surprise to Sunderland. So, yeah, I just think it was a really sloppy bit of football. You got to give Sunderland a lot of credit. The responses were really good. Didn't go into their shell at all. Actually pressed really aggressively after that. Went man for man all over the pitch. So really frustrating and a really good response at the same time as well.
Just quickly, Phil, on that, because I think one of the trademarks of our game this season, I'm not saying in every instance and every half of the season, but more often than not, I think we've come out the traps and actually surprised teams in the first couple of minutes with high presses and pinning teams in for a little bit and almost kind of surprising them that way. And I just felt this seemed to be the complete opposite, that we very rarely started games asleep like I think we did at Villa Park.
Yeah, what's strange as well is if you actually take the first 15 minutes as a whole, we actually did surprise Villa a bit, and I think we actually did catch them out a little bit with how aggressive we were and how fast the start we made generally. And I think you could tell there were times in the first 10, 15 minutes where we were pressing really, really high. Alderete was following his man like quite far into Aston Villa's half, and they didn't seem to be able to work out what they should be doing to counter that. So bizarrely, even before his goal, Rig had a couple of really good moments, didn't he, where good bit of footwork got into a really good position. So generally speaking, bizarrely, it was a really good start of the game. And I think we actually did rattle Aston Villa a little bit. It's just, as I say, one moment where we switch off and we get punished. And I think that was the story of the game. That's the levels, because the Aston Villa we played at the start of the season at the Stadium Light, for whatever reason, were obviously in a really, really bad way. At the moment, they're in a really good way. And they were so sharp in the final third, like so sharp. And they just didn't really make a mistake in the final third yesterday. And as much as it was tough to watch, I have to sort of begrudgingly, sometimes I think you do have to give credit, and especially with McGinn and Watkins, because obviously it's an incredible story. And hopefully, sorry to go on a bit of a tangent, but there are players in our squad who should be looking at that, because these are guys who've been on the same journey. And look at them now; they're absolutely top end Premier League players, just through self improvement and determination and keeping pace. So, sorry, it's a complete tangent, but I just thought, I did come away with a begrudging respect for the level that I watched from those two guys, given their kind of story in the game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Cracking performances from the two of them. But just bring you in on the goal, Johnny, because Lafay and Ronaldo, I was praising them, especially early part of the season, for being fantastic, working together down that left-hand side. But just communication just seemed to fall apart for this goal, didn't it?
Yeah, it was uncharacteristic, I think, is the word I'd use. It's not the kind of defensive display that you would associate with this Sunderland team. And, I think you both have kind of said it as well. We just didn't start well in terms of that lapse in concentration. It was, you can't really legislate for it, I don't think, as a coaching staff either. Like, obviously, Lebris hasn't told them to go out there and lose a man within the first couple of minutes and let crosses be peppered into the box or whatever. Lafay just, it looks quite bad. His body language doesn't look great for that first goal, which I don't think he's being lazy. I think he's almost just, before he's even realised that he's caught himself between two players and he suddenly doesn't know which way he needs to go. He's turning his back a little bit. Ronaldo then is left slightly in the lurch because Lafay in front of him is not bang at it. The ball's allowed to come into the box, and I think, Phil's spoken about Watkins a couple of times already. Like, his movement all game was brilliant in the box, and he wasn't the only one. There were Villa players where the word sharp was used as well. That's, I think, spot on. Like, they were just that half a yard quicker to spot where the ball was going to go, or to be able to shake off a defender who was marking them. And those are the extremely fine margins that are going to get you found out at the very top level. And in some ways, there's no disgrace in it, because Aston Villa are a team who are going to qualify for the Champions League next season, have been in it recently, gave PSG a very, very good run over two legs. Was it last season, I think? And we're very unlucky not to beat them. So they're no mugs. They've got some real quality in that team. And yeah, I think it was a bit of a learning experience for us, in that it's not good enough just to be able to work hard. Also, you have to be switched on all times fully, because those kind of lapses, I mean, you wouldn't even notice them as a lapse in the Championship, because nobody would get anywhere near punishing you. But in the Premier League, obviously, that's a very different story. So a little bit of a reminder, perhaps, of what's still left to improve, to try and fully bridge that gap to where we want to be. But yeah, it didn't cover themselves in glory.
Yeah, the only people in the lower leagues who seemed to punish us in those situations were Newcastle striker or fans who were strikers for the opposition side, who then did Shearer's celebration.
I was just going to say that Shearer celebration, man, must have seen that about 50 times.
Absolutely. But we're talking about the response, Phil, and there was a caption that came up in the coverage that said Villa and Sunderland were joint top of the league table, if you like, for points gained from losing positions this season. Both had gained 19 points from losing positions. So it's maybe no surprise at our response, although to go to a place like Aston Villa and respond like we did was fantastic, because on 9 minutes, it was level. Chris Rigg, fantastic goal. But just to kind of, the big picture about this goal for me was all about Siddiqui and Diarra, because I think they've been a bit stunted, especially Diarra, because he hasn't had a full season for us with his injury and then AFCON. And I think it was fantastic to see Diarra being positive on that right-hand side, making a brilliant run, getting into a great position, crossing the ball in, and Siddiqui coming in from the left and joining him, then laying the ball off to Chris Rigg. And then one touch on Chris Rigg, getting it out of his feet and curling it into the far corner was absolutely fantastic. And a great moment for Chris Rigg, of course. But I just think this kind of goal maybe sums up what we might see more of next season, Phil, in terms of Siddiqui and Diarra.
Yeah, and also, not that he was necessarily directly involved in this game and this goal particularly, but also the aggression you get from playing Mukele at right back, in terms of the positions he takes up and the risks he's willing to take to push the opposition back, is such an important part of, I think, Sunderland looking a lot stronger recently in attack. And I agree with you. I think if you go through the last 2 games, I think you'd be able to find probably 20 clips of Diarra making a really, really good run beyond the defence to create space for other people. Naturally, sometimes his teammates don't find him. Sometimes he hasn't been able to find the final pass or whatever. But I think you can see why someone wanted to sign Diarra. And if he keeps doing that, he's going to be a really good player for someone. And obviously, the difference with Diarra and Siddiqui is that you've paid about 15 million for one and 30 million for the other, right? And at the moment, that's not what's been reflected in the contributions. And it's just one of those things that's football. But I think you're right to single Diarra out for his contribution in this goal, especially because, as I say, I think it's the kind of run he's been making a lot in the last couple of weeks. And I think if you're able to, not that you should get past the miss, because obviously it's a defining moment in the game. I think if you look at the last couple of games, even the Newcastle game, I think you've seen Diarra make strides and start to look more comfortable. And I do see that as a positive. But I also do understand where people feel, if they feel a little bit underwhelmed because of what Sunderland paid, I think that's fair enough. So, yeah, great move, really confident, as I said, and great finish from Rig. And let's be fair, it's been coming for a few weeks now. He looks increasingly comfortable at the level. You were saying afterwards, he's something he's been working on a lot in training as well, sort of cutting inside and getting that shot away on his left foot. So, great moment for him. I think that's been kind of the story of the last month, really, is Rig kind of clicking for him. And sometimes you see him do that in a Premier League game, then you remember that he's still only 18. Which understandably we forget all the time because he's been around for ages. We've been talking and writing about him for years. So fantastic moment and yeah, really, really good team goal. Dare I say the kind of team goal I don't think we would have scored 4 months ago away from home. Someone might remind me of a goal that we did score that was exactly like that and I'll look completely ridiculous. But certainly off the top of my head, I don't really remember us attacking in that kind of numbers and with that kind of confidence. So I think if you take the last 3 away games, I think there's really positive signs. Now we've attacked 3 good teams. We've had good moments in all of them. So there's loads of positives.
Absolutely. I mean, Johnny, brilliant moment. Chris Rigg's first Premier League goal. And, he's been highlighted even in the summer as one of the young players to watch in the Premier League. He probably hasn't had the minutes he wanted this season, or he looked to get, certainly at the start of the season when it seemed like he'd play a big part in it. He went missing for one reason or another, picked up maybe a couple of niggles, loss of form, whatever. But once he's come back in, he just seems to have this new determination and to make that wide position his own as well. I just think he's kind of bossed that position since he's come in. And it's an opportunity as well. You look at the injuries we've had and then players maybe not coming in, hitting the ground running. And it's a real opportunity for Chris Rigg to say, no, this is my position and I'm going to be in that starting 11.
Well, if he keeps performing like he has been the last couple of weeks, then he's going to have no issues keeping the spot, is he? Because he's been brilliant. I think Phil was right. He's had some great contributions the last sort of few games. He played really, really well against Brighton, even before the derby, and he was unlucky with the disallowed goal that day. That could have been his opener. His Premier League account opened that day, and thankfully he's not had to wait too much longer. But I think it just reflects the fact that, yeah, like you say, his development seems to have taken a massive sort of leap forward of late, where it had maybe looked from the outside looking in that he was starting to plateau a little bit. And as you say, he was struggling for the minutes that he probably would have wanted. But it comes back to something I've been banging on about all season. It's a squad game. There is a lot of football to be played in any given season, no matter what league you're in. Everybody knows that fixture congestion is sort of the talk of the football media sphere. At any given time, there's going to be articles and think pieces and stuff on the TV and the radio all around how players are overworked and there's too much football and all this. So it's fine to have a player like Chris Rigg who has a spell out the team, because there's going to be a time where he comes back in. Players are going to get injured. Players are going to lose form. Tactics are going to change between games, especially for this Sunderland team as well. We know that Lebris is very, very adaptable, and he's not afraid of making decisions that would look strange if certain managers made them. Lebris he's quite happy to tinker if he thinks it's going to get him results in any given game. And so, yeah, Chris Rigg, okay, he had a spell in the middle of the season where he wasn't playing that much, but come the end of the season, it doesn't really matter whether you make your appearances, at the start of the season, in the middle, at the end, spread across. Come the end of the season, if he's played a good amount of football, then that's going to help him. Start of the season, Isidore was scoring loads of goals, and it was, well, that's it. Isidores our striker for the rest of the season. Then it's Brian Brobby. And then now, Isidore scoring goals again. It doesn't matter. Like, people need it, and I'm sick of saying it. There's no such thing as a strongest 11. There's no such thing as a first choice, really, barring, obviously, granted, Jack, Robin Roofs, there's a couple in any team. I'll grant you that. But outside of that, it's so fluid, and that's a good thing. We don't want to be married to a particular 11 where as soon as a player goes down, all of a sudden you're scrambling and you've got big problems because you don't know how to fill those holes. The way that we've approached it, I think, gives you so much more flexibility. And we've seen that the last few weeks. This run of games from Chris Rigg wouldn't be possible if he'd either been shoehorned in just for the sake of getting minutes earlier in the season, or if he'd been shipped out on loan. There's a lot of short-termism still amongst, it's not just Sunderland fans, it's, all fan bases have this kind of attitude through them because it's what football used to be like in England, but there's a lot of short-termist thinking around squad selection, and there's no need for it because as we are now seeing, okay, the result didn't go our way, but if we'd run an 11 into the ground every week, we would not have been able to perform that way against Villa yesterday, and we wouldn't be on course for a good end of the season. So to bring it back to Chris Rigg, thrilled for him, absolutely delighted, fully deserves it, and he's a big tick in the box it's another big tick in the box for how the club have handled his development, because it would be very, very easy to have been a bit impatient with him, but we've given him time and he's starting to repay that faith. So if he keeps going the way he's going, then he's not going to find himself out the team for very long anytime soon, is he?
Yeah. First Englishman to score for Sunderland this season, and he became the third youngest player to score for Sunderland in the Premier League. Have you gents got the other two? I'm sure you've got them, Phil.
No, I don't think I do, actually.
Michael Bridges and Connor Wickham were the two younger players who scored for Sunderland in the Premier League. So he was became the third youngest player to score for Sunderland in the Premier League.
Should have got Wickham.
Well, you see, I would have forgot Wickham and got Bridges.
You forget how young Wickham was, don't you?
I know.
Maybe just because he was such a big lad. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So Connor Wickham was 18 years, 212 days old. Michael Bridges was 18 years and 117 days old, and Chris Rigg 18 years and 305 days. So Chris Rigg was a veteran compared to the other two with 100 and odd days between them. But anyway, just getting into the momentum of the first half, Phil, because I thought we took control of it for quite a chunk. And then Villa started to swing the momentum back just on the half hour for a few minutes, and they pinned us in a little bit. And they ended up getting that goal, and it came from the right-hand side. I thought Rodgers, who you mentioned Watkins, you mentioned McGinn, I thought Rodgers was absolutely fantastic as well. I mean, what a player he is. And this was a good example down that right-hand side. But we're talking, Phil, about what happened with Lafay and Ronaldo, and I thought this was almost a carbon copy incident. And on this side, this is almost the type of thing you want Chris Rigg to play games for, because he's going to make this mistake, and it's going to be pointed out by the coaching staff. You could call it a mistake or loss of concentration or whatever, but not maybe going with the runner, gets in behind, and it's a simple cross, and Watkins makes it 2-1. But yeah, it seemed very similar to the first goal.
Yeah, it was. And I think probably the difference between the second goal and the first goal is, I think, as you quite rightly point out, it came at a point where Aston Villa had probably started to work things out a bit and take a bit of control, which is what the best teams do. And I think that second goal was probably an example of them grinding someone down a little bit. And you're exactly right in what you say. Maatsen makes a really good run. And I was actually, because Rodgers had the ball for quite a while on that flank, it was right in front of me. And Rigg was watching him. He knew exactly what the plan was. He knew exactly what was going to happen. It was just one split second where he just switches off, and that's all it takes. And obviously, it's a mistake from a Sunderland perspective. I give Villa more credit for that goal personally than I do the first one, because I think that was a consequence of them over a period of time in the game grinding Sunderland down a little bit. And I think that's a fatigue-induced error mentally as much as anything. I think you've got to give credit for Villa for the way they see he's controlled the game for a while. And yeah, I think that Sunderland, caught Aston Villa out a bit with how they approached it initially. But like all the best teams do, they kind of worked out how to take control of the game. And it wasn't as if Roos was making save after save. So I don't want to make it sound like the goal was inevitable, because that's not the case. But I think certainly it came in a phase of the game where Sunderland had definitely lost a little bit of control that they'd been able to enjoy. mainly because Xhaka was playing so well in sort of the 15, 20 minutes after the equaliser.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just like Phil said there, Johnny, I mean, other than hitting the bar from a header from a corner, this was pretty much Villa's second chance, really, or second shot on target, or whatever you want to put it. But it was a blow because this came, 10 minutes before half time. But in a game where we thought, oh, here we go, it's going to be one of those afternoons after 90 seconds, we did so well to get back into it. And then we conceded this goal to go behind again. And it was almost a blow to us. But 5 minutes later, we had a free kick and O'Neill knocked it down to Siddiqui, who had a great chance and his shot was deflected wide. But, we did concede that goal. But again, another fantastic reaction to going behind, wasn't it?
Well, the mentality's been fantastic all season, hasn't it? Barring the odd sort of blip where we've had games where we really have looked like we were just dead and buried after a while. And sometimes that's forgivable. You think of Arsenal away, Man City away, games like that where we were just clearly outclassed by a better team, and after a while the players had recognised that. But that's okay. Whereas most games we have shown the kind of attitude that we showed at Villa Park. It's been a mainstay of our season where, okay, yeah, things go against us and it hurts, and the players maybe sometimes it takes 5 or 10 minutes to sort of dust yourself down and fully get your focus back and get back into your shape and everything. But we've always been a team under Lebris who's been able to deal with setbacks well, whether that's within a game, whether that's between games. When we lose games under Lebris, by and large, we tend to respond with good results immediately afterwards. So I wasn't surprised by it, but it was good to see that, displayed yesterday. And I think, because with the goal that we conceded, I think you've both discussed it quite well. The only thing I want to highlight as well is it was such a split-second moment into a calamity, and the O'Neill sort of flying salmon diving header attempt kind of sums that up, where if you actually watch it back, O'Neill does lose Watkins right before the ball comes in, but it's like a step. Watkins just sees that the ball's about to come in. He sees that he needs to take a step. He gets the wrong side of O'Neill. And then from there, as soon as the ball's in O'Neill's, he's dead. You can't do anything from that point. And in classic O'Neill fashion, he flings himself at the ball and it ends up looking a little bit silly. But I think it's almost like a microcosm of the way the game went. There was that ever so slight moment of lack of concentration, the tiniest of mistakes, and Villa have pounced on it. And all of a sudden, something that was tiny then, turns into a goal. It turns into something big. And so I think with that in mind, it's almost even more impressive that the players were able to drag themselves back into it so quickly, because it's painful enough conceding a goal when you've seen it coming. When you concede a goal out of a bit of nothing, okay, it's not a defensive mistake. It's a bit of attacking quality, but still it's that sucker punch element where you're like, we just felt like we were in the game here, and suddenly it's away from us again. And they've barely done anything. That sometimes can be more difficult than anything to recover from. So with that in mind, it was really encouraging. And Siddiqui was unlucky with that as well, by the way. When you watch it back, it's a brilliant block from, I think it's Onana it is for Villa. The way he just manages to stick his back heel out in time. So yeah, unlucky, but very, very pleasing to see that never say die mentality, which obviously was on full display at the end of the game. But good to see that that's not died a death just because we're safe.
Well, that's it. Well, before we get into that crazy second half, I think it's a good chance for us to take a quick break. So we'll be back very soon. And welcome back to How We're the Podcast. And we're getting into the second half, Phil. And as Lebris said, I think after the game, that the second half started a bit like the first. But actually, I thought we were pushing forward and we were looking like, right, let's get straight back on level terms down that left-hand side. And Enzo Lafay and Ronaldo got into a right mess. I'm not quite sure about the pass from Enzo Lafay. I'm not sure about the first touch from Ronaldo. McGinn, as he did so many times in the afternoon, stole the ball from Ronaldo. And O'Neill and Alderete seemed like they were all over the place because we were attacking. And then Watkins' first time ball through to Rodgers, and he slid it past Roofs. And this was the goal that kind of killed it off very quickly, wasn't it, Phil?
Yeah, I think it's the easiest goal to analyse, isn't it? There's absolutely kind of no point going over it. It's just bad, and then it's absolutely brilliant. Like, talk about ruthless, as you say. Not sure about the pass. Obviously, not sure about the touch. Lets McGinn in, and then after that, I mean, it's every touch Aston Villa take from there is perfect, isn't it? So, what can you say other than don't give the ball away immediately after the second half started, because otherwise you might be in trouble. I'm sorry, that's not the most sophisticated analysis, but it was just like, lads, maybe don't do that. Yeah, great move though.
Well, that's it. If I put the question in a different way about the goal, then Phil, because we're now 3-1 down, and as I said, the only other chance I can remember, and that I've actually wrote down or acknowledged, was the one off the corner where they hit the bar off the header. And all of those goals. This is a frustrating thing about it. We were 3-1 down, and the performance was good, but you could almost look at every goal and go, God, each one of those is avoidable. But at the same time, we're saying Villa's ruthless. I mean, is it a bit of both, or were we gifting Villa goals?
There's a little bit of both. I think probably there'll be a lot of neutrals and a lot of stat heads who'll say someone had probably been due this a little bit, because maybe we were having spells at the start of the season where the opposition weren't being particularly clinical and we were being a bit more clinical than the opposition. Maybe this is just football where, we've had a game yesterday where we've come slightly on the other side of that, where we played against a team who've taken pretty much every significant chance they've had in the game. I think the second goal, I think, is a really good goal from Aston Villa. The third goal is a really good goal in the execution, but it stems very clearly from a Sunderland error. And I think you would probably have to say the same about the first goal, given it, as you say, is right at the start of the game. So I'd probably put the second one in a different category, because although it's preventable, I think it's a really good phase of play from Aston Villa, whereas the first and the third, I think, especially being right at the start of each half, I think they're the ones that Sunderland will be really kicking themselves for, because yes, you have to praise Aston Villa for seizing the opportunity as clinically as they did. And I don't think every team in this league would do that, but they are obviously preventable ones, aren't they? The second one is preventable in the same way that every goal that ever scored is preventable, sorry. But you can kind of, I think, doff your cap to Aston Villa a bit more for that one. I think the first and the third one would probably be my feel. Certainly it was yesterday anyway.
Yeah, well, if we're saying every goal can be preventable, imagine what Labris is saying when he's analysing this after the game. But yeah, Johnny, I mean, another body blow, really, again, with trying to push on, and the team looked confident coming out from that second half. And within a minute, there you go, a few passes, few seconds after us being on the attack on the left-hand side, the ball's in the back of the net and we're 3-1 down.
Yeah, I think, Phil summed it up. It's bad. It's bad from us. You can't do that. And it's good from Villa. And, just on the topic of there about like the preventable goals versus what's clinical and what's stupidity. I mean, as you've said, like technically every goal that's ever scored is preventable because the defending team could stop the chance being created or the keeper could save it. By the same token, like every attacking team is always going to look at a move that breaks down as, we've cocked that up, instead of, well, that was great defending. So, for every amazing front four that goes forward trying to score goals, there might be an equally brilliant back four or back five trying to stop them. So, it's always a bit of give and take between things that are mistakes and things that are just bits of good play, barring the obvious exceptions when it's, a clear howler or something, obviously, or a 40-yard wonder goal. But 99% of goals scored in games of football are going to have elements of blame and elements of credit to them. That's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, I think I agree with Phil. Goals 1 and 3 for Villa were very much more on the side of Sunderland could have done a lot better there. Whereas the second goal, I think, as I was sort of touching on before, it's like a tiny moment, a tiny mistake that then gets amplified because the resultant play is so ruthless. But yeah, you come out and start the second half and you give a goal away basically straight away after already doing that in the first half. At that point, it's becoming a pattern and you do need to address that. It's something that, if that happens again, next game or the game after that, then serious questions need to be asked, because you cannot allow that to start creeping in. It's going to sound ridiculously obvious, but you can't be trying to play every game from 1-0 behind. That's just not a route to winning points. So obviously right now it's sort of an isolated thing within the Villa game. It's just something where, if that does begin to creep in, it needs to be stamped out as soon as possible, because far more than any individual mistake for any of the goals, that would worry me if that's something that creeps in going forward.
Well, Villa seemed to take control of the game after this, Phil, and I think they had a decent chance for Watkins, again created by McGinn. And I think Labris felt this, and it's around the hour mark. Alderete went down injured, and it seemed to trigger a triple substitution, which I think they were probably planning on beforehand, where Ballard came on for Alderete. Which meant actually Ballard partnered O'Nien at the back, which hasn't happened too many times since the playoff final for a few minutes, and certainly the playoff semi-final. But Rigg came off as well for Talby, and Ronaldo came off for Hume. Just a couple of things on those substitutions. Rigg didn't look too happy when he went to the bench. He looked a bit miffed, if we're honest, on the bench when he took his seat on the bench. The other thing is Trey Hume coming out of the team, and he seemed to have been one of the first names on the team sheet, Phil. And he's been on the bench, and we'll obviously come on to his contribution to the game. But you can't imagine him being happy with a place on the bench. But you did talk about the difference in how Michele gets us up the pitch on that right-hand side.
I think it's really harsh on him. Do I think is it unfair? Sort of, yes. But I mean, I'll get your lads' opinions. Does Hume get in ahead of Michele or Reinildo when everyone's fit for you too?
Nah, no chance. As much as I love him.
Yeah, and I say that with the absolute utmost respect for him. And I think what he's done this season is sensational. I think he's got the second most minutes in the Premier League, and that tells you everything about Trey Hume. And look, it's going to be. He would have absolutely every right to knock on Labris's door and say, "What have I done wrong this season? I've just come off the bench and scored a goal. Where am I going to play on Friday night? Where am I in the team?" And I just feel like Labris is probably going to say, "Unfortunately, I've got two elite fullbacks in the team." I mean, Reinildo, I didn't think had a particularly good game yesterday, but let's not overreact. He's been pretty sensational when he's been fit this season. Maybe it's just something about Aston Villa and Reinildo. It just doesn't work. I don't know. Maybe there's just some kind of odd thing. But yeah, so I do think it was really harsh on Hume not to be in the team. But can I sit here and say that I think it was the wrong decision? I don't know if I can. And I think I personally thought the Rigg substitution was fair enough. I thought he started the game unbelievably well, and I thought that his contribution faded. I don't know what you two felt about that. I thought it was. I get frustrated when Talby comes on the right because it's clearly not where he's his most impactful. But the only other option is to take Lefebvre off or move Lefebvre into the middle. And I don't think you can take Lefebvre off, and I think that was justified later in the game. So. Yeah, I think I can understand why Rigg and Hume, for different reasons, would feel hard done by, but certainly in the moment, I thought they were fair enough. I think you could make the argument in hindsight that Isto should have come on earlier because Broby was getting nothing out of those two centre-halves, and maybe Isidore against the high line with his pace was the better option, but that is complete hindsight 2020, isn't it? I haven't seen what happened later in the game, but if I was to criticise the subs, the only thing I would say is that maybe Broby stayed on the pitch a bit too long, given the game he was having. But I can also understand that, given where he's been at for the last few weeks.
Yeah, well, that's it. Well, Sunderland, we didn't have our first shot in the second half until the 67th minute, which was Brian Broby when he was slid in. But I did actually make a comment to say Broby was given absolutely nothing during the afternoon, and even the period after the subs. For a good while, Johnny, that Aston Villa were getting the odd half chances, and then with about 10 minutes to go, as Phil touched on, Isidore came on for Broby, and then and actually at that point it seemed like the triple substitution didn't have any impact. I actually wrote that the subs had no impact, and then suddenly we make that fourth sub, and then with 5 minutes to go. We have a really high press. And I just think, again, the mentality of this, you're 3-1 down, there's 5 minutes to go. And we pin Villa in on the left-hand side, almost, near their penalty area. And a combination of Trey Hume and Enzo Lefebvre, who was fantastic, and nicked the ball and gave it to Trey Hume. And Trey Hume just seemed to wander in, and you thought, is he going to pass it? Is he going to cross it? Is he going to, what's he going to do for me? And just curls it in the far corner and past a World Cup winning goalkeeper. And as Phil said, if there's any way to say, I should be in this starting 11, that's the way to do it, isn't it?
It really reminded me of Phil Bardsley at home against Man City. I can't remember which season, but Pantilimon was in net, scored a very similar goal. Anyway, total tangent. But yeah, no, I agree. I think Brilliant finish, wasn't it? Like, I think the commentator that I listened to said he picked his spot. I'm not sure about that. I think he just fairly got his right foot through it and trusted that as long as it was on target, he was going to beat the keeper for pace.
That's hard.
Listen, it was still a great finish, but I'm not sure that he exactly had the postage stamp in his mind. I think a little bit of, muscle memory in terms of that's if you're getting in that position, that's where you're taught to try and shoot, isn't it? You go across the keeper, you're not going near post. But technicalities aside, it was a great finish. And I think the thing that I was happiest with was the positivity. When the ball, because the ball slightly breaks free at first when I think there's maybe a defensive header from the Villa player. And then Hume's actually, he's behind the Villa player that he's marking. So he's got a player between him and the ball. And, Lefebvre then ends up going for it. But Hume, at a certain point, just recognises, I can go for this here. And he just sets off. He's direct. He goes straight for the ball. Lefebvre does well, I think, in the challenge. And then, luckily for Hume, the ball does just break nicely for him into his path. His touch is good. And the fact that his first instinct wasn't, to fall to bits in the box, like, oh, I'm not sure what to do here. I'm not used to this. He could have stopped, turned back. Like a lot of players, I think. Obviously, we were 3-1 down, so we needed a goal, which sharpens the mind a bit, maybe. But a lot of players would have looked backwards. They would have gone for a short pass. They would have, passed the responsibility on. But I think the fact that Hume just drove at the byline, went to the goal, backed himself, and finished it off the way that he did. Again, I think it speaks to the character of Hume and the character of the squad that we've got players who are willing to try and seize a bit of initiative. And just to sort of tie it all back to something that Phil was talking about earlier, we weren't attacking like this earlier in the season. And I think part of it was an almost necessary acceptance from a lot of the players that sometimes the priority is going to be not to concede or not to lose a game, like for periods within any match. And that's okay, because that's where we're at. We need to just get points. We need to stay up. Sometimes you've got to prioritise. Whereas now I think that mentality is essentially totally flipped. And it's okay, well, how do we score goals? How do we try and win games? How do we go and maximise what's left of the season? And, it's a minor thing to be talking about in the context of one goal in one game, but it's reflective, I think, of a bit of a mindset shift that we've had since we hit 40 points against Leeds, really. And, it's difficult to carry that on into a new season because come August, we're going to be starting from scratch again and 0 points, just like everybody else. But yeah, I think it shows that there's a different side to this Sunderland team if we can play with that sort of mentality more and cut out the silly goals within the first 2 minutes of each half would be ideal.
Easier said than done when you've got when you're facing a strike force that the likes of Aston Villa have got. But Phil, I'll bring you in on both goals because you can talk about that Che Hume goal, but 58 seconds later it was, to be exact. Sunderland were kind of back on level terms, and this one straight off the kickoff, and this is Enzo Lefebvre all over. I mean, what a fantastic challenge to actually get the ball in the first place. And I made the point on the reaction pod, Phil, that when you've got Enzo Lefebvre in a central position like that, this is what he can do. He can lift his head. And if you've got runners like Isidore was on that, if you've got willing runners who were willing to play off the shoulder, Lefebvre can find them. And as fantastic as he's been, and I think he's been brilliant on the left-hand side, I just think there's an element that you lose when Lefebvre doesn't pick the ball up in the middle of the park like this too often. I think you want him more often on the ball in these positions to be able to pick out that pass. And fantastic pass. I think it went through someone's legs on the way through. And Isidore, we've seen this so many times, haven't we, Phil? Isidore running through on goal and an easy finish, really. I was a bit concerned. I was a bit worried because he had loads of time. But brilliant finish, wasn't it, Phil?
Yeah, well, Martinez slips over, doesn't he? Which I'm not taking anything away from it. Isidore, it's a really good finish, but that
I don't know what it is. Johnny's trying to take something away from Hume. You're trying to take something away from us.
Nah, I only say that because I've seen a few people say, well, why didn't Diarra just do what Isidore did? And well, one of the reasons is because, Martinez was getting up off the floor when he stopped putting it. Don't get me wrong, he takes it brilliantly. It's a great run. Reminded me of his goal against Middlesbrough, just in terms of not thinking about him and Lefebvre, just not thinking about just being on that wavelength. He's already started the run by the time the pass is made. I think Lefebvre has been unbelievable this season. I think it's has it gone under the radar? That's probably not quite right. But I think when you consider we were having conversations heading into the first week of the season about whether this guy was going to get in the team, the goal contributions he's made, the quality generally that he's played with, I just love him. For me, like, I just think he's almost like the perfect Sunderland player. And I think that move sums it up. He's tenacious. He gets a big sliding tackle in, and he's got that bit of quality to pick his pass. I mean, everybody knows I bang on about Enzo all the time, but I just think I just love watching him. I'm just grateful that I get to watch him every week. I think it's just great, and I think that goal just sums him up completely. The two sides of his game, I think, were both on show there. And another glorious pass for Diarra, which we'll come on to in a second as well. It's absolutely inch perfect, isn't it?
Yeah. Can I just ask Phil quickly just about, because Isidore got the goal, of course, and I think it was his first goal since October. He was linked with moves in January. He's definitely not happy about the amount of football he's getting. You would not be surprised at all if he moved on in the summer. And just to ask you that question, because Labris is still bringing him on, of course, maybe ahead of Mayenda, who you would fully expect to be, looking at his age, to be a Sunderland player next season, because they're still trying to develop him. But Isidore gets the nod, and you wonder about his future. So what do you think his thinking is with making that substitution? Or do you just think Labris is just focusing on the game in hand?
Well, maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I think maybe he'd identified that the best way to try and get back into the game was to try and expose, Villa's kind of high line and get a bit more pace onto the pitch. Football's a funny game, innit? Because when you watch Lefebvre thread that ball through Restore, Aston Villa's defence is like stood on the halfway line. You're like, why don't we just do that for the last 90 minutes? We'd be winning 8-0. It's so easy. But yeah, I think it's difficult. I mean, Labris loves Isidore. There's no two ways about it. It was Labris who brought Isidore into the club last season. Isidore came in really as more of a left winger, and Labris just saw something and said, I'm really confident this guy can play through the middle. There's a really, really strong relationship there, and there's a lot of trust between the two. It's just, we talked about Hume before. Broby's just been too good, hasn't he? And I'm a little bit frustrated with the lack of minutes that Meyenda's had kind of all season. Really, obviously, it's difficult. You don't see training, you don't understand, so it's hard to kind of judge those decisions. But I've kind of been a bit frustrated by the lack of minutes Meyenda's had. But I just think Labris has got a lot of faith in Isidore, and when you see him make those runs and when you see him finish like that, you can kind of understand why. And it looks tricky for me in terms of, I don't think much is going to change next season, is it? I don't think Broby's suddenly not going to be first choice anymore. So I do think potentially we are heading towards a quite natural partner of the ways. But if that is the case, and still an if, I hope he goes out on a bit of a high, because you forget how much we talked about strikers and how we couldn't sign a striker, and there was that guy for not just last season but the start of this season as well, and he's been a big part of the story. So obviously nothing's decided yet, but it would be lovely if he could get a real kind of a few more good moments between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, and Phil strategically avoiding the impending £100 million bid from Bayern Munich for Brian Broby. But Johnny, we'll get on to the moment that I think everyone was talking about, because I think you actually mentioned the one before that, a minute or two before that, where Michele played the ball through to Diarra. Diarra crossed the ball potentially to Isidore, and it was headed down on the floor out for a corner by Conser. But then a couple of minutes later, Lefebvre, absolutely fantastic again, played Diarra clean through on goal. And I think actually the reaction to it, as Phil touched on, Johnny, was probably not helped by the fact that Isidore went through and just stroked it past Martinez, and Diarra tried to do something completely different, and it didn't work. But this is the thing. It's just, in the grand scheme of things, it's one chance, but it's just the context it was in, the timing it was in, that just amplifies everything, isn't it?
If you're going to try and finish it like that, you have to score. You have to. It's like Lefebvre's Panenka against Brentford, the penalty. I'm not one of these who's like, you should never, ever, ever try it and chip a penalty, or you should never try lob a keeper or whatever, or showboat and this and that. It's a totally legitimate attempt to score a goal, because if the keeper goes to ground early and you've dinked it over him, in theory, you can't save it. Clearly, this one was not actually dinked over Martinez, because he did save it. And I think it's important, before we get into a bit of criticism, to say that it's an excellent save from Martinez as well. It's a really good, strong hand that he gets up. He doesn't just put himself vaguely in the way and get a bit lucky. He properly, actively saves that ball. So can give some credit there, but it just looks so bad when you try and chip the keeper like that and it doesn't come off. Add on to that the fact that Talby makes a brilliant run to his right. And look, again, like at the time, I was spitting feathers at Diarra, thinking, like, how on earth have you not passed that ball? When you watch it back, Talby does arrive quite late. You've got to imagine he was absolutely screaming for the ball, mind. So still, I think the blame probably does rest with Diarra, but if you've got an option where you pass it 4 or 5 yards to your right and it's basically a guaranteed goal and you go for the shot, like I said before, like take everything else out of it, you kind of do just have to score. Otherwise, you're going to get the blame, you're going to get the criticism. And as I say, at the time, I was absolutely foaming. I was not happy at all. But it is a good save. The run is excellent. The pass is absolutely phenomenal. So we had to do a lot of very good things even to be in that position in the first place. It's not like he's, we've been gifted an absolute dolly of a chance by Villa and he's somehow contrived to miss it. That was what it could and should have been, was the cap on a really, really good incisive counter-attacking move that would have given us all 3 points. The fact that it then goes down the other end about a minute later and we end up, what happens, then obviously makes it look a lot worse. But overall, I think Diarra should do better, decision-making wise. Not so much I'm not going to criticise the finish too much, because once you've made the decision to shoot, at that point, it's an execution issue. And I'm never going to be too critical of players who get things wrong in the moment, because it's not like he's thought, oh, well, I'll just half-arse this finish. He's obviously trying his best to score. Players get things wrong. It happens. That's fine. It's part and parcel of football. It's the decision-making I take issue with, because you make a better decision there, we win the game. It is as simple as that. And I know that it's not his fault we lost. There were so many other things through the game that we've talked about in this episode where, defensive mistakes and this and that. But unfortunately, in the cold light of day, if he passes the ball, Sunderland win 4-3 and we're currently 6th in the Premier League. He doesn't pass the ball, we lose 4-3 and we're currently in the bottom half of the Premier League. And when I know that even if we do finish bottom half of the Premier League, it's still been a successful season. But when the prize is there and it's there for the taking with seconds left in the game, and the swing is as stark as that, you're going to cop a bit of flack. That's unfortunately just part and parcel of the modern game. I would say, mind, that it's yet another good run from Diarra. As you have mentioned, I think both of you have said, he's been making those type of runs a lot. Like, he doesn't get the chance if he doesn't do some good things first. So there is credit there. There's positives there to take. It's just very difficult when he misses and we concede and we lose.
Giving credit to gritted teeth there. I mean, and Frank, coming on to you, Phil, about that chance, because Johnny's talking about decision making. Now, I actually looked at the chance back. Martinez, he closes down the angles really quickly. Now, I'd talking about what is it, and actually, I think he's just learned from that Isidore chance, and he's charged out. The angles are closed down, and actually, and Diarra, when you're in that position, I don't think players are necessarily looking around them because they know that 20 yards in the clear, the through on goal, it's them to take the opportunity. And I think he just thought that was his best option at that point. I don't actually think he was trying to be fancy. I don't think he was trying to Panenka it. I don't think that was the intention. I think he just thought the angles aren't there to play around him, and I'm going to wait till he goes to ground and play it over him. But I don't know, how do you see it, Phil? Do you see Diarra miss, Martinez save, a bit of both?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this was kind of like right in front of me where I was sat in the press box. It's clutch goalkeeping, and you can't play a high line like Villa do unless your goalkeeper is really, really good. And there was a few times where I thought we might be in with a through ball. Martinez was just like there from nowhere. It's a great save. I think the one thing I definitely feel quite strongly about is this was right on my line, and for me, Talby was never an option. Like, I don't want my player to get the ball there and stop to look around to see if anyone's going to be quick enough to make the overlap and run. When he gets that ball, for me, in the position that he plays on the pitch, I want him just to be thinking about scoring the goal. And it's one of those, it seems like a weird thing to say, but I'm just not sure the replay reflects the fact that for me, I just don't think Talby was ever in that equation. I haven't got an issue with Diarra going for the shot. The chip, yeah, it doesn't work. I think it's really good goalkeeping from Martinez. I think it's absolutely clutch. I think it's very obvious really that, with Diarra and Siddiqui, the last third is the last bit for them, isn't it? And I think that's okay with where they are in their development. It's a bad miss, and I agree. I totally agree in terms of, like, Habib Diarra is an experienced footballer now. He's not going to be like, he's not going to be surprised he's getting criticism. It's the crucial moment in the game. It just is what it is. It's just that's Premier League football. But I think I certainly would defend him for not squaring it at Talby. I think in that position, I think you've got to want players who back themselves to score. It's not the right option. It's also great goalkeeping from Martinez. I think both things can clearly be true.
Yeah. And then just 36 seconds later, Johnny, it kind of compounds the miss, and Villa go 4-3 ahead in the 92nd minute, I think it was. I might have got that wrong. It might have even been later than that. I can't quite remember. I'm just double checking. It was, 93rd minute, apparently. Digne out wide had far too much room to cross it in. And Abraham got the run in and got on the wrong side, and then it came across him, and that's the game, 4-3. And again, it just adds. I think if that goal hadn't gone in, people would have been looking at the Diarra chance almost like in a nostalgic way, like we look at the Isidore chance at Anfield with a smile on our face, and not, the fact that we ended up losing the game.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest, mentioning that Isidore chance, that is kind of a good thing to bear in mind, I suppose, with the Diarra chance. I mean, like, obviously Phil will have had a much better view actually being in the press box at the ground than we would have watching on the telly. So if you're saying Talby was too late to be an option, I think that is fair enough. Like I say, I didn't really realise how late he came in until I actually sat back and watched it on the replays this morning, because I couldn't bring myself to do it yesterday. But the Isidore chances, like you say, it's a good parallel where, like the Liverpool one especially, I remember people at the time were kind of slating Isidore for it. But really, if you looked at it, again, like the angles kind of narrowed before he's had the chance to even make a decision either way. The Diarra one, similar. I think the point about Martinez was right. He's out immediately, and he's just had the Isidore goal to be able to give himself a template. So that's, like, I think basically, yeah, you're right, Chris, is my point. Like, this Diarra chance is being so harshly criticised and discussed so much because of this that's just happened at the other end. And I think the fourth Villa goal, for me, that is just really, really tired defending from Sunderland and demoralised defending from a team who's just watched the chance to win the game disappear. Obviously, it's only Diarra's the only man who had the shot, but the whole team will have if not expected, then hope to see the ball in the back of the net. So to then be straight back under the pump again immediately at the other end of the pitch. I mean, because Villa literally did go straight down the other end. Martinez, makes the save, rolls the ball out, and he's already telling his whole defence, get up the pitch. And then, the numbers get forward. I think I struggle to be too critical for any of the individual defenders or the goalkeeper, because I think basically just everybody was a bit slow or not quite good enough with that. We don't stop the cross. Once the ball comes in, Abraham, like you say, is able to get the wrong side. Roofs is a little bit kind of not really doing anything. Like, not that it's his fault at all. It's just he's also caught with that sort of almost indecision that seemed to have just struck everybody. Like, he's not fully come out because he can't really, because it's not his ball, but he's not fully back on his line. He kind of has to do that thing that keepers do when there's a shot from close range, and he just spreads himself, and he's a bit unlucky that the ball just sort of evades his, I think this is sort of, his left arm's out, and, the ball it sneaks underneath. And yeah, it's just all around one of those where we've had that kick in the teeth where Diarra doesn't score, and then straight down the other end, they're, right in our faces. Abraham as well would have been quite fresh, having only come on later in the game as well. So he's not plagued by the same, lack of sharpness that the rest of the players on the pitch were, who've just got through the full 90 minutes. So yeah, I'm not going to be too critical to any individual, but it is for all the praise that we've given them for the mentality through the whole season and today, that is a moment where you maybe look at it and go, that's a bit switch-offy, that, and you can't afford to do that just because you're disappointed you've not gone 4-3 up. There's still a point there to protect, so, you don't want to see it, but at the same time, they're not going to be in that position too often, are they? So I don't want to be too harsh.
Yeah. Well, very specifically about this goal, Phil, because Luke O'Nien has come in for a lot of criticism on the socials and message boards and things like that. We all love Luke O'Nien on this podcast. Luke O'Nien's front. So at times we've wished we had 11 Luke O'Niens on the pitch. But in this instance, in this game, because he's been almost that last player involved, whether it's at the back post on the first goal, I think it was the second goal, he was challenging the back post. And then on this one, it seemed like Abraham got the run on him and he didn't notice, and him and Hume didn't really mark him, and Abraham got in and scored. But before then, if you look at each goal, people weren't going with runners. On this one, Digne had too much time to put the ball in and ended up picking his spot and putting a good ball into the box. Do you think it was just almost circumstance that O'Nien's taking criticism because he was that last person in that last action of these goals? Or do you think he was maybe a yard off in these occasions?
I think he was definitely a yard off yesterday generally. I think Watkins had the beating of him. Luke always seems to provoke extreme reactions for whatever reason, positive or negative, by the way. Sometimes a decent performance becomes an incredible one, and sometimes a slightly poor performance becomes a dreadful one. It just always seems to be the way with Luke. I thought specifically personally in the second half, I thought he struggled with Watkins. I think my only kind of take on it is that all 3 goals, Sunderland haven't stopped a cross, and they've allowed 3 quality footballers time and space to pick a cross and have been punished. The other thing I would say is I don't think it's right to pick out O'Nien's performance individually, because you shouldn't be doing that if you're not going to talk about Reynaldo, who for whatever reason was well short of what we've seen from him at times this season. I don't say that saying we should be going around like calling players out and stuff. I just mean I can't quite get my head around O'Nien being the reason we lost the game yesterday. I can only give you my opinion. I did not feel that at any stage. I thought he struggled. Would I bring Dan Ballard in on Friday night? Yes, I absolutely would. But I think there was quite a few players who weren't really at their best yesterday. And for me, if I look at where the game was won and lost, I think it was lost because we just consistently didn't stop crosses into the box. And especially the second one. I mean, you look at the pace and the speed of Matsson's delivery. Has O'Nien lost Watkins? I guess he has, but it's a bit of a leap to suggest that you're not going to concede a goal from that cross either way. Like, you cannot let Maatsen put that delivery in from that position. You're asking for trouble regardless of who's playing centre-half, in my opinion. I feel like people aren't going to agree with that assessment, but I don't know. I feel like Luke always provokes strong reactions either way. And I don't think it was his best game yesterday. Well, it wasn't his best game yesterday. I think it'll have been a harsh learning curve for him. But I have to say that I think there were other players who I think were short of their best yesterday as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just going back onto the positives about Sunderland in general at the minute, Phil, just sticking with you for a minute because you touched on it earlier on, that Sunderland have played 17 games away from home this season, scored only 13 goals in 17 games, but 5 of those have been in the last 3 away games. So we've scored, best part of half of those goals were scored away all season in the last 3 out of 17. Does it represent a little bit of a shift, maybe, in terms of we got those 40 points? Do you think the shackles have been taken off a little bit since then?
I think for me, it's player availability, in my personal opinion. It's the composure of Roos at the back. It's Xhaka in midfield. It's Mukele at right back. I just think it's player availability. I think when we get something close to our best 11 out, I think we're capable of controlling the ball. We're capable of hurting teams. I think we are getting better. That's the thing that excites me. I think we're adding new layers to the team. I think, I mentioned there that, all right, it hasn't come up yesterday, but I do think Diarra has given us a little bit of an extra dimension in attack. I just think we're improving. As I said at the start, I think that's the biggest positive for me, because there's been a lot of chat of, have we got lucky this season? Are we kind of primed for second season syndrome? Well, maybe. But for me, that argument was always based on the fact, well, we've got a bit lucky with XG and all that kind of stuff. And if we don't improve, then we'll be in trouble. And that may be true. But to my eye, we are improving. I think we're developing as a team, and next season might be really tough, and it will be hard to replicate what we've done this year. But for me, if you look at certainly the level of performance in possession away from home, I think we are getting better as the season grows on, and that's something that really encourages me going forward. But I think first and foremost, I think the story of the season is player availability, because there are certain positions on the pitch where when our best player is not available, there's a big drop off. I think that's life. It's your first season back. You're not going to have a 20 strong squad of players ready to play at a top half level. So for me, it's player availability, but I do think the team is getting better. It's exciting.
Yeah. You mentioned XG there, and you saw Johnny getting excited. If you'd mentioned XA, I mean, he would have been all over it. But
Again, you did that to yourself, Chris. I did not do that to you. Okay, you've got to let it go.
If anyone doesn't know what we're talking about, go back and listen to the Room 101s we did during the international break. But Johnny, look, what is it? 5 games left, 3 of them at home, 2 points up between ourselves and Chelsea in 6th. Still a brilliant end of the season, isn't it?
Oh yeah, and there's still a huge chance for us there as well. I mean, we were chatting about it amongst ourselves this morning in one of the group chats. Looking at the fixtures, there's plenty of reasons to be positive. We've finished the season with a home game against Chelsea, who, they're not exactly in a great place at the moment. So that potentially could be some sort of straight shootout for European spot. We've got Man United at home still to play. Look, they're a decent team, don't get us wrong. Much better under Carrick than they were under Amorim, but they're not likely to have so much to play for come that point of the season. They look like they're going to be pretty comfortable in the Champions League places. We've still got Wolves to play, who more than likely going to be mathematically relegated by the time we play them. Obviously, football, it's not played on paper, etc., so it doesn't really matter too much what the different teams that you're playing have got going on. But it's still, it's still worth taking into consideration when you're looking at the rest of the season. We've got winnable games. We've got games we can take points from. And, we've got games, we've got Everton to play. That's a team who are right with us in the league competing for the same stuff. There's absolutely no reason why we can't go on a bit of a run from now at the end of the season and get ourselves into that top 8, And if we don't, then that's fine. It's not like, most seasons, if Sunderland have something to play for, it's some sort of desperate panic that if they don't get it, it's going to be a disaster, whether that's promotion or whether that's survival. There's always a massive element of fear. Whereas here, there's no need to be fearful of anything. If we progress and we improve and we qualify, absolutely amazing, over the moon. If we don't, oh no, a mid-table Premier League finish. Oh, that's a disaster. How will we possibly cope?
Yeah, well, final word for you, Phil, because, like we said, those 5 games left, some brilliant games in there. I mean, looking forward to playing Forest because we've got some part to play in the relegation scrap. Obviously, Man United at home, first trip to the Hill Dickinson Stadium, Chelsea at home. We've got Wolves away, who we're not going to play next season. But some fantastic games left, Phil. But it's just the fact that, of course, being Sunderland fans, we don't get this too often, where we've got 5 games in the Premier League, great fixtures, and we can just enjoy them. And it's almost trying to saying to fans, take advantage of this, really enjoy it, because it's not very often this comes around, is it? An end to the season like this.
No, it's great. It's just a lovely spot to be in, and I think we shouldn't lose sight either of the fact that imagine if someone had painted this scenario to you in the couple of days after the Wembley final.
Yeah.
That we'd be ahead of Newcastle in the table, we'd have won both the derbies. We're watching Spurs games, wondering if they're going to get relegated with a beer, just being like, happy days. It's, and I think people can take encouragement and excitement away as well from the fact that the players have not switched off. I know for a fact they are super ambitious about trying to get into the top half and do something special between now and the end of the season. So we can just, as people who follow the club and love the club, just sit back and enjoy it. And, the players are not switching off. They want to finish strongly and do something. And I think even for yesterday's frustration, I think you can see from their performance that that's the case, right? They absolutely turned up to try and do something. So let's try and remind ourselves to enjoy it. We will all fail because we will all fume. And, that's life, that's football, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, we got to enjoy it, man. It's as I say, just coming away from the game yesterday, thinking about some of the games I covered back in the day, and just leaving grounds being what the hell am I doing? And I was being paid to be there. Do you know what I mean? It's just you know, we've got to embrace this. But also, like, when someone goes through 1-on-1 and they chip it straight to the goalkeeper, then like it's annoying. I'm not trying to be too like pious about it. Like, but yeah, it's a fantastic end to the season, and I think the point that you've made is right. We don't know when this will come around again, so let's try and enjoy it.
Yeah, and I didn't think I cared about who went down and if Spurs went down until Brighton scored that late equaliser, and I jumped up and found myself celebrating, and I still don't know why. Just it was just one of those moments that I just had an instinctive response to. But anyway, just leaves me to say thank you very much, Phil. Always a pleasure. Absolutely fantastic to hear from you. So thanks very much, Phil.
Pleasure. Always happy to come on. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Good stuff. Cheers. And thank you very much, Johnny, as always.
Thank you. Please have us on after we win and not lose next time, though.
You stuck your hand up, so it's all your fault. But anyway, cheers, Johnny. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. Don't forget, we'll have loads more on the Roker Report website, and we'll have pods every day this week, as usual, as we look forward to the visit of Forest on Friday night, which should be, it's a huge one for them. And hopefully it'll be another home win for us. So look out for all of that. But from us, it's bye for now.